So here's an interesting review, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs by country star Marty Robbins. This album was released probably, before most of us watching this were born. This thing came out in 1959. As you can imagine, production and everything isn't the hottest in this year, but this album does sound very crisp for its time. The vocals on here delivered by Marty are pristine, and they're so clean. The instrumentation is very samey on most songs, not a lot of innovation. But then again, not a lot of industrial noise was happening in 1959, so that's kind of forgivable. Marty Robbins, you probably know this man from his hits off of this record, Big Iron or El Paso. I only figured out about this guy by El Paso being featured in Breaking Bad, and then that led me down a rabbit hole. This whole album and this whole artist was referred to me by a friend, and thank you for referring me to this and actually suggesting this video. This brings up the point, yes, you can leave anything in the comments and I will review said record whenever I get to it. Do with that as you will. Anyway, let's get further into this album. Marty Robbins' storytelling on here is its greatest triumph. Whether it is talking about how he is being hung tonight because he killed an ex-lover and her boyfriend, and how he regrets this in his jail cell as he's getting ready to be hung, whether it's him killing outlaws with the big iron on his hip, whether it is him loving a Mexican maiden and then he kills her and then rides away, or simply his appreciation for water and this 160 acres in the valley that he's getting ready to buy. The storytelling on this album is amazing, and Marty definitely paints a very clear vision of a Western time with this entire album. The record is a country ballad album. Keep that in mind. I don't like a lot of country music, but this came out well before the time that most of it was shit anyway. So props to you, Marty, for being a real one. I want to quickly state that yes, I do love pretty much everything about this album except for these few things. I believe it's easier to go over my nitpicks about the album than sit here for 20 minutes talking about why I love it so much. First off, I do want to say the instrumentation on here does feel a little samey after a little while. This record is 44 minutes and has 14 tracks. So, El Paso, the riff and chord progression on that song is as memorable as it gets. Also on Big Iron, the two giant songs off of this album. But everything other than that, the acoustic guitars that you would usually find around a campfire with the level of storytelling associated with it and with this album, the acoustic guitars do get a little old after a little while. The chord progressions stop innovating, which is forgivable considering not a lot of buzz was happening about finding out new shit about guitars at the time, and that's fine. Another thing with the instrumentation is I feel it is very, very quiet compared to Marty's voice over the entire thing. Marty's voice is a lot louder than the instruments, and I can forgive that to an extent because Marty's voice sounds great on here, don't get me wrong, but I would like to hear the instrumentation behind it as well, considering it's his voice and the instruments. There's no ambience or background synths, it's just his voice and guitars, and when you can only hear his voice and not any of the guitar behind it, you kind of begin to wonder, is it there at all? And yes, it is, but it is sadly very quiet. And speaking of samey, the lyrical content does get samey after a little while. Not saying hearing about Marty and his fantasies killing a lot of gunfighters and outlaws and Mexican maidens doesn't get, not funny ever, because it is funny and it is ridiculous, and modern day rappers need to look up to this dude because goddamn, he's fucking hard apparently. But after a little while, you would like to hear something else, but it doesn't get old. The storytelling and the way he paints this picture is always amazing, and this whole album's a good time. I just wish there was more lyrical content about other things that Marty appreciated about the West, not the people that he planned on killing and the people that he planned on, cheating on and riding away with. I understand this review wasn't as long as the other ones that are posted, but to be fair, this isn't a new record, and I don't think that I should have to break it down and just put it out instantly because it's fresh. Nobody's talking about this thing, so, cut me some slack there. And yes, this review is short. I think this album is a great 7 out of 10. The storytelling, God, it's so good. Marty's voice sounds really fucking good. The acoustic guitars, they do get old. The progression, there are several different chord progressions in the entire LP, but they don't change into anything after that. They use the same chord progressions most of the time. Most of the record does feel samey, except for the few standout tracks that are released as singles. Not saying that this album has a ton of filler. I would say this album has a ton of filler, with those 2 hits being on here and everything else. But the thing about the other songs on here are they all paint this giant mirage picture that Marty wants you to see of his vision of the West. And those tracks do feel essential to this album whenever you consider that. I just wish there was more prominence put on those songs, and I wish there were more innovations and forward thinking put into those. Like I said, this is a great 7 out of 10. If you have listened to this, if you haven't, definitely go do. It's not that long of a listen. It's only 44 minutes, and I highly suggest you do it. If you have listened to this record, please let me know what you think of it. What's your most memorable lines and lyrics out of this thing? Let me know everything that you think about this album in the comments. Thank you.